Yes, go ahead.
I have a question for Anne. Do you know how popular Diana tragedy was? And if you do you have any evidence of influence on the women at that time in moving towards the women of today?
Diana Tregarde, as most what we would now probably call fantasy, even though fantasy, science fiction, horror, and sometimes even romance kind of blend together as a genre. That's one of the least popular things Mercedes Lackey wrote as far as commercial success. That is to say that if you were to put all the sales of that together, it doesn't equal, say, one printing of a Twilight. That doesn't make it any less. It's actually a work that has been studied by sociologists for the purpose of looking at how gender role reversal starts that open-ended questioning. And some of my other references when I was doing the research have the same thing. They actually used even more modern works like Harry Potter and a few other Marion Zimmer Bradley works, which, once again, were not necessarily the most financially popular works. Specific examples of women in power that have talked about influence didn't use that specific book. One I can think of is actually an astronaut, Sally Ride, was once quoted as saying that not only did Girl Scouts give her an idea of what she was capable of, but the science fiction books that she stole from her brother's room gave her the idea that she could do anything she wanted to do despite what people might be telling her around her.
Do we have other questions here?
How do you feel that Diana Tregarde has really influenced a lot of fiction today, of any genre?
I would say that not just Diana Tregarde, but, well, you could use Diana Tregarde in some of the works that Mercedes Lackey did after the fact, which were much more commercially successful, such as, you know, some of her Arrows Prince kind of books, that series. She was influenced by the fact that writing gave her the freedom to express something she felt was a disparity. And I think that every author, no matter what type of writing they do, in the fiction realm, has that same kind of attitude. They're given the freedom to explore things that they might not otherwise be able to explore. So I couldn't say that there's a specific example necessarily. I can say that from personal experience, it influenced me. This was one of the first things I read when I was younger, along with Wonder Woman comics. And, you know, I have to work Wonder Woman into everything I do lately. But it influenced me to realize that even when I was born in the 70s and growing up in the 80s, women still didn't have as strong a presence and role in alternative ways that they were. Yes, some women had to go out of the house to work, but it was more out of necessity than them trying to express a change in how they were expected to behave. Reading things like that allowed me to say, well, I can do whatever the heck I want, because they can. And yes, I know the difference between fantasy and reality, but it gave me the idea of, well, if they can do it in a book, then why can't I do it in real life?
So
Questions right here?
Oh, for Dawn.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Let's roll.
The dramatic connections fascinate me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, for example, we have a lot of writing. Wagner uses these characters in his operas.
Yes.
But I was wondering exactly why an Irish, well, English or whatever story, right, with Merlin, why that particular part of it has gone into Germany so much more than perhaps even the King Arthur story has.
Whenever you look at some of the early Celtic tribes, you had some of your larger mainland tribes, and then obviously your Brits and your Irish. I think it was actually just a few months ago they were able to conclusively prove that there was a migration that happened from, I believe it started in Scotland, then they went to Ireland, and then they went down into Germany. So it's entirely possible that this tribe brought that story down there with them. As far as when that happened and when the dissemination of these stories happened, I don't know that yet. I think they're still working out all the particulars of it. But I think there's always been a strong Celtic connection in Germany. I mean, for God's sakes, like Hallstatt isn't that far away, so.
You know, I'm just kind
Yeah.
of curious about which way the legends went, because normally the ideas are that we start in southern Germany and we go then migrate out into parts of Eastern Europe and even to Africa and then up to England. And I'm just wondering if this story was originally German. You know, because you have the translations you say haven't been thoroughly translated.
Yeah, I mean, there's a giant argument going on right now that it's actually not European at all. That it came from, I forget which of the Asian epics. I think it was actually part of the Ramayana. But that's far from being completely developed. I mean, that's just something that is getting an open dialogue now. But I think that this particular story, I believe that it is a European story and specific to the island nations, because the manifestation of it is just, it is stronger there. It's within the people and within so many more of the other stories that we have. Whenever you go into Germany, it does feel like it was kind of a passing, but I think that particular author had heard it and said, no, I need to put this down. This is culturally important. From everything that I've read, that's...
Because even Lancelot, of course, is a French invention.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, France has a huge hand in it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we had a question back there.
Yeah, this is for Ms. Ann. Recently, I read a study where I think it's over 70% of powerful women, particularly Fortune 500 women, played sports in their college or teenage years, and they see a correlation there. Did you see correlation between sports and athletics and the rise of powerful women?
Well, only because I do such weird feminist research in my spare time. Those same similar studies have actually correlated groups such as Campfire Girls and Girl Scouts in the same manner, saying that girls that have that kind of foundation in teamwork rise to be powerful. And actually, a lot of your Fortune 500 women were actually Girl Scouts at one time too. So to point it just to athletics and sports, I don't know that I could do that. I think it's more about the feeling of empowerment that playing a sport gives you psychologically, whether you win or lose. The feeling of achieving something beyond yourself is more of what allows them to succeed. Because not every person that plays sports in college and high school tends to be that successful in business. So I think it's just one aspect of empowerment that allows them to do that.
Question over here.
Do you think Mercedes Lackey was a pioneer in this, or weren't the works of Andre Norton well before her time doing the same thing?
I wouldn't say that she's a pioneer. She just happens to be the author that I chose to use as the platform. I would honestly say that I think that actually a pioneer for role reversal may not have even been a female author. If you read Jules Verne's works, for example, not only are they science fiction as far as the aspects of science being different, but the female characters that are integrated there have a sense of power that other authors in that time frame would never have allowed a woman to have. I think that it's just science fiction or even fantasy now in general that kind of allowed that open discussion and that change to kind of push it forward.
Question?
I have a question for Dawn, more of a personal question.
Oh, goodness.
Okay, say that you do meet a German that speaks High Middle German. Would you be interested in working with that person to actually translate the original versions of these texts?
Of course.
Do you? Oh, but would you like we had a question?
Yeah, something I read some time ago that always, piqued my curiosity is they put the Celts starting in Austria. And so if that's the case, it's the beginning, then it's the connection back there, Austria being today a country, but then it's the Germanic tribes.
Yeah.
So
The Germanic tribes were huge. That's the thing, is we kind of look at it and we think, okay, well, there were the Brits, and yeah, we have, about 125 of those, but I mean, the Germanic tribes were just insane with the amount of movement that they had, and we probably had at least 200 to 300 of them in a very highly concentrated area, all with their own language and their own traditions. So I think it's kind of nuts to be able to say, oh, well, this one came up with it. I mean, we don't know right now. I mean, we can't even translate most of their languages yet.
Referring back to the Arthurian legends, what I felt like you were saying, that there is no systematic way of approaching them because they come about at different times in different ways, and therefore they're like independent, dealing with the same character, but in terms of systematic thought it doesn't fit, just like the Greek plays. They just don't fit. Okay. Keeping that in mind, let me go back to your presentation, and I'm asking myself, what is it you want us to know? What are we supposed to learn from your presentation? What can I take with me?
You can take with you a question of who are these people and why do we not have a systematic approach? Why are we not looking for what could be a string of truth in these stories? Why are we not looking at that question? I feel like sometimes we get very involved in the literature of it and we don't wonder who were these people? Why don't we try to flesh them out? Why don't we want to know where they lived or what happened to them? We kind of just get caught up in the magic, which is beautiful, but there's something else going on there. And I think that that's kind of what I want to know, is what was going on there.
But does that make an assumption that they did exist?
Of course.
But that is an assumption.
To me, no. to me and the research I've done, no.
Good enough.
Any more
Yes.
questions?
Don, who's funding the Long Nest project?
The actual Cornish government.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's not working with corporations who have proprietary rights over the information.
Oh, they're pulling a bunch of archaeologists from the surrounding area, not just in Cornwall, but Wales, Ireland, mainland Britain. I mean, anybody that wants to come in, but they have to go through the government. If you don't go through the Cornish government, you're not getting in.
That's not the same question as who's funding it.
Sorry. I want to get in and I can't. I'm really upset about it.
Any more questions?
I was going to say that, the Scilly Islands have been notorious for attracting a lot of wrecks. As a matter of fact, one of the last massive, wrecks was a complete fleet of warships, and that's what prompted the stating, starting the longitude board, because they didn't know where they were. But so it's not only one ship; it's been massive.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to find a lot of things in there.
All right, thank you. Questions from the crowd? And thank you very much. Thanks to you all for participating.